News stories were coming in about this strange virus in Wuhan, China. It was weeks before we saw the first cases in the US. As the numbers went up each day, my curiosity got the best of me, and I started plotting the curves. Here's stories from real people all over the world and how they've responded. I'm Sally Hendrick, founder of Shout Your Cause, and this is COVID-19, The World Responds.
Hey, Elizabeth, how are you doing? This is Sally.
Hey, Sally, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. I'm so glad that we get to talk today because I know that you have really been following what's going on with the COVID-19 situation in a very engaged kind of way. So tell me a bit about you and what you do and what's going on right now.
Yeah, well, these are some interesting times to be in my field. I am an independent college counselor, meaning that I'm not affiliated with any particular institution, high school, secondary school. So I work with individual clients here in Nashville, where we're both based, and around the country. These are some unprecedented times for institutions of higher learning, and we're all just trying to figure out day by day, sometimes hour by hour, what the landscape looks like.
Yeah,
due
exactly.
to, the virus and all that. Yeah.
So what's happening with your business, the college counseling part?
It's interesting. A lot of, as we both know, a lot of small business owners are taking a lot of hits, and that's hard stuff. I'm finding the reverse to be true. With all of the schools being closed, students are having very limited access to their college counselors that are on site at schools. And so I have been extraordinarily busy with people, reaching out and asking for help, how to navigate not only the typical college counseling sorts of things, curating a list and working through applications and all the things that we've done in the past, in a very standard way, but now looking for information, insight, into how to read this situation and how we move forward through these times of uncertainty.
So in particular, you're working with high school students who are applying to college?
Yes, my clients, some of them are as young as freshmen in high school, and some are as old as first semester seniors. And it just depends. I, offer a variety of counseling services. So, I kind of meet the students where they are based on what their individual needs are. And that varies region by region through the country. Something helping somebody get through the nuts and bolts aspects of their application process for older kids. Whereas, with younger students, it's helping them curate their curricula for 4 years of high school based on what they see that they want to do
Gotcha.
in terms of higher ed. Yeah.
Gotcha. So do you feel like there's more stress involved right now with trying to figure this out, or are the students, tending to adjust pretty well? Are you seeing anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone is stressed. I think everyone's working off a baseline of pretty significant anxiety and stress. And I think that's true for the students and absolutely for their parents. I think there's stress and anxiety just with the uncertainty. Nobody knows, are they even going to return to school this year? There's still many, many schools that are leaving it open-ended. So will juniors and seniors be able to go back, and sophomores and freshmen as well? But it's of particular concern to the older students. Will they go back this year? Or what will this virus do to the landscape, and will they return to school in the fall? If not, what does school look like as we move forward? And I have clients who are, a large population of clients in the New York City area, and it varies region to region, but they're particularly concerned because it's such a hot spot.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to ask you that next about the location of your students, if they were all over or if they were like concentrated in the Northeast. Do you have any in Nashville as well?
Oh, I do. Yeah, I do. I have several students in Nashville, the greater Chicago area, greater Boston area, Washington, D.C., and kind of metro New York. So, Bergen County, New Jersey, Connecticut, that's that area there,
Right.
Westchester County.
Do you think this is also affecting the choices that they're now looking at? Are they shifting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because of what the virus has done, to many families' financial situations, I think, I'm seeing a difference in students who were working on applications in the fall to where they are now. One young woman up in the greater New York area is coming to my mind, and, her choices were Notre Dame, Georgetown, Dartmouth, and one of the SUNY schools. And that was her, kind of a safety sort of school for her. And she's going with SUNY because of the uncertainty of the financial aspect of paying for college. And that's going to be broad and widespread and deep. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think schools like, for us being here in Tennessee, UTK, UTC, and the other state universities are going to become much, much more popular and much more competitive.
Yeah, I can see that as well. I'm actually interviewing the UTM chancellor, UT Martin, next week. So we went to college together.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I recently had a conversation with a student from UT Martin, and we talked about how this is going to probably change the perception of different diplomas in the work field as they graduate. So as these kids graduate and coming out of schools, perception is going to change about everything.
I find that very interesting because I know who you're talking about. He and I actually spoke about this, and I'm going to interview him as well. And the interesting part, I think, is that with the way things are going online, imagine 3 years, 5 years from now, everything's changed over to more of an online course taking situation, for an example, or at least part of it. You could potentially go and select curriculum from multiple places.
Exactly. And many colleges at this point have that sort of set up kind of in that real life bricks and mortar setting. Lots of schools in the New England area, that cluster of small liberal arts schools, offer a consortium of education. So you can take different classes at different places. And that's always been appealing to a lot of kids if you're going to a small liberal arts college and you want to major in English. But hey, you also want to take a exploratory course in engineering, you can pop over. Well, this just got a whole lot easier, this whole, model. And, as I said on a conference call with the national organization a couple of weeks ago, I was somewhat kidding, but, Harvard's now an online school. The model has changed, it's, everything is different moving forward. I think this is a time of and I don't use this term lightly, revolution in higher education.
Wow. I mean, the possibilities are endless, how this is going to play out. The other thing that we personally have a concern with is that one of our children, actually 2 of them, are supposed to go abroad, one in the fall and one next spring in Europe, and in 2 of the most affected countries, Spain and France. And so we don't know what's going to happen with that. The latest word we got was that the Spain trip was still on as far as they were concerned for the fall, but that would be, it's really up in the air. But they haven't canceled it as of yet.
I think that's pretty standard right now. That's the communication I think most students are receiving, with the exception of some students I know who are planning to study in Asia. Those programs have been canceled pretty much across the board at this point. But Europe seems to be still holding steady, kind of a wait and see approach. I don't know how much longer that will play out. I would expect until I think parents and students would need an answer probably by the end of the fiscal year for many of these schools, which is, June 30. So we'll see.
Well, we're actually looking at taking some classes in the summer. Now that things are kind of up in the air, we don't know what we'll be able to register for in the fall. We don't know if we're registering for the Spain courses or if we're registering for something in Boston. And, or if we're registering for something online through the Boston University that we're associated with. So it'll be a very interesting time. We may be doing the summer classes just to preempt any issues that the fall may bring.
Absolutely. I'm very engaged with the undergraduate institution I attended up in New England, and was on a call there. And there are more questions than answers at this point. And I appreciated, the leadership's transparency around that. Dr. Fauci, says the virus determines the timeline. And so there is really no way to anticipate where we're headed. There really isn't. And it's going to vary region by region as well, of course.
Yeah, I agree. It will vary. I mean, we are so geographically separated and divided. I know that we're the United States of America, but at times it feels like the divided states of America with with all of the governors having different messaging and the president going from one situation to another, and how that all tends to trickle down into individual mayors' decisions. So it makes it very difficult to not have a cohesive, consistent approach for anyone to make any real decisions.
Absolutely. And I think decision making is largely hinging right now on cultural interpretation of what's happening. And so, despite the fact that I've lived here in Nashville for 15 years now, I lived in Boston for many, many years and have family up there. And it's very interesting and enlightening to hear how they're talking about how they're receiving information versus the kind of information we're receiving here. And it's all coming through different lenses and different filters. And so that's going to make that cohesive approach even more difficult. I think, certainly nationally and in terms of education as well. I think it's kind of going to be each institution for him or herself at this point.
Yeah, and that's kind of sad because I feel like a lot of these great institutions, some of them may not come back or may look completely different. Right.
They're going to have to adapt and change. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on, the size of the school's endowment. I don't think Princeton's going anywhere. But there is a small ungraded school up in New England called Hampshire College, which was, kind of a experimental form of learning, kind of a Waldorf approach to higher ed. And they've announced that they're closing their doors. They just aren't able to make it. This was the final nail in the coffin for them, which is sad because it was meeting the needs of certain types of students. Students don't have, there's not one type of college student, every student has a different set of needs and wants. And so when we lose a school that's so unique like that, it's really, I feel, a tremendous loss to the landscape of higher ed.
Yeah, I agree. So can we switch the conversation a little bit to more of the medical side of things? I know that you have dealt with personal pulmonary issues, and then you have a child who has allergies. And what are the fears that you have related to that? What's going on in your mind?
Well, I mean, with regard to myself, I survived a massive pulmonary embolism about 6 years ago, I think. And so that, severely restricted function in one of my lungs. So I'm kind of dependent on the one. And when you hear about any sort of respiratory illness, even flu season, it's scary. It's scary. And And but with flu, we've had very clear protocols, and there's vaccinations, there's things we can do that we know, and we know how the flu operates. It's the uncertainty and the unknowns about this new virus that have been unsettling. And so, as the result of that, we have been extraordinarily conservative and have stayed in since early March. We brought our son home from college and have not ventured out at all. We do grocery delivery and such. Both of my sons live with very significant asthma, and my older son has some other lung issues going on, as well as multiple life-threatening food allergies. So it's been a time of challenge, even trying to locate safe brands of food that we can bring into our home for him. We've managed to pivot, which is great, but again, that adds another layer of uncertainty, which can lead to stress and anxiety, and has on some level.
I can imagine. And I didn't even think about the aspect of not being able to get the same types of food. We've had to adjust. I mean, granted, we've adjusted from saltines to water crackers, but what do you call those, water table crackers or whatever they're called? Yeah. So we've adjusted there because they'd had no more saltines or premium, whatever you call them. But, and we've also adjusted other types of, foods and brands and so forth. But I didn't even think about the fact that you've got food allergies, you've got gluten-free this or that, and those types of supply chains may be interrupted in all of this.
Yes, and that's what we're finding, because a lot of these specialty food companies, are kind of mom and pop operations. And so they operate pretty close to the margin, and a lot of them have closed down. And the other thing is thank goodness that we've been able to get what we've needed and able to afford it. But there's a lot of, families who are reliant on food banks, and there just is no allergy friendly food in food banks. Of course, my son lives with a peanut, tree nut. One of his allergies are peanut. Two of his allergies are peanuts and tree nuts. A staple of food banks, as we all know, are peanut butter, right? Peanut butter, and so, these families are struggling, are definitely struggling. Yeah. And it's kind of a grassroots network of, what we call allergy moms who are just getting our hands on things and just personally sending things to other people so they can have what they need. So it's been incredibly edifying to see that how we've come together in some ways, and also incredibly stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine so. I mean, you think about it, there's always the laughing about toilet paper and the lack of toilet paper everywhere. It's probably sitting inside all of these schools and buildings that have been shut down, and in these major large rolls that, that fit into these big apparatus that, that are in these big buildings. And the supply chain has not been able to react to that quickly enough to be able to be more so in grocery stores and convenience stores rather than in the supply chain going into people's workplaces and into their home. I mean, not their homes, their schools. So it's definitely a huge shift for so many businesses to be able to handle that. So the food supply and all kinds of other things. We were actually looking at trying to order a case of toilet paper from Uline. I don't know if you've ever heard of Uline, but Uline is something that where my husband orders boxes and other types of materials, packing materials. They also have large, like super duper Costco size of, of other things that you would supply your building with. He has a furniture studio, and so he's got a workshop in the back, and so it's a very commercial type operation. And so because he orders from that company, they're not allowing anyone to who's not already a customer to order certain things. But he went in to try to order a case of the toilet paper, and he couldn't do it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he couldn't. And I'm like, we could order like some of those big rolls and just be like, look, I got my toilet paper in this really massive roll that you see at the airport. But he could, but he couldn't even order that. And
Wow.
so anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. It is interesting.
Yeah. So as far as we've talked through, a lot of the college concerns, and then we've talked through some of the medical and food supply concerns. And then what about the fact that if somebody got sick right now in the family, wouldn't that be a scary thing to have to go to the hospital or to an urgent care center?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The exposure at this point for myself or either one of my kids would be a significant risk and above average. We're all considered high risk people. And the other concern I've had is, telling my son, be careful. Let's just be super, super careful about what you're eating, because when somebody lives with a life-threatening food allergy, if you eat something and have a reaction, you, of course, react with epinephrine, but the next step after that is being transported by ambulance to the hospital for monitoring. And so that's another concern. This is not a place that we want to end up at this point due to, an honest mistake when you're eating something. So there's a couple layers to it. And we just have to be, very, very vigilant. And so far, so good.
Good. And let's keep it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're the same way. We've been on some walks as a family a couple times, and I twisted my foot one day, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again. So I'm not going to be stepping in the mud anymore, on this trail. So we've decided that, sidewalks and other places where really no one's around are a little bit safer.
A little bit safer, yeah.
Have to be careful. I'm not running, that's for sure, because
no running.
Yeah, no running, just walking, trying not to trip on anything. Yeah, nothing. No.
Yep. Back to toddler rules.
Exactly. So before we wrap up, what about the hopes that you have of what could come out of this?
It's interesting. So, I mentioned before, I think this is the time of incredible societal revolution or potential societal revolution. And I mean that in kind of a peaceful way, not hopefully, but complete change. Maybe rebirth is a better word. I guess I see two sides of the coin, particularly when I think about higher ed. I worry about widening the gulf of disparity between, the students who are considered haves and have-nots with this, certainly. But I also think that if people are able and willing to be creative thinkers, we could create new models. We could keep the traditional model of traditional college in place whenever that is safe to resume. But at this point, couldn't we take advantage of a hybrid model or, as we talked about before, the online model? There's going to be such a new set of needs born from this. And even among students who are currently enrolled in certain colleges, where they were freshman year, if they're a junior now, the landscape is different probably for not only them, but their family. And I hope that the goal of continuity of education is going to be a priority for schools. I think some schools it certainly will be as much as possible, but I would love to see new models introduced, kind of, throw anything against the wall to keep these kids engaged, enrolled, and continuing to learn, because that's the goal. Well, however that happens, however that model can proceed. But I do worry about that, the separation becoming even wider, because there will be a handful of people who will be able to continue on their original charted course, and the goal for higher education is to kind of broaden your horizons, right, and to engage with a multitude and to experience adulthood in a diverse and exciting way. And I worry that that's going to be more difficult unless we engage these new models.
Yeah, well, I think that that's going to have to happen. And it would also extend that opportunity to people who cannot afford to go to college now, because if
Absolutely.
they can log in online, look how many more scholarships could be given. Look how many more, things could be done to mitigate the costs of living up in the Northeast, for example. It's much more expensive to live there than it is in the South,
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
or in some, in the Midwest as well. So we're looking at so many potential things to reach other students that otherwise, and I think it'll happen even in our traditional, education growing up, in our elementary schools and middle schools and high schools, and all of that can really steer towards a new direction, which would be very interesting and challenging in the upcoming years.
It would be great to see the playing field leveled in terms of education across the board, starting from early childhood all the way on up. I mean, that's obviously something that we all know, or most of us know, that needs to happen. And I think the schools, especially the private institutions, they're in the business of selling, right, these intangibles, the experience, the XYZ university or college experience. And I think they're going to really need to reevaluate that and figure out how that experience can be translated into different models, because if they don't, and they don't have a huge endowment that they're sitting on, that could spell ruin for these schools. And so the creative thinkers are going to be the ones who come out of this, I think, least scathed.
Do you think also, with a lot of the moving back to the food part, do you think also there's hope in having better access to these types of foods that are needed for people with allergies, because the online grocery thing is going to become more prevalent?
It depends. These specialty foods are expensive and somewhat difficult to make. They need separate lines to be certified as, whatever, allergen free. So at this point, unless these large, conglomerates like Mondelez or, one of them is willing to kind of put the money into that, I worry about these little brands disappearing. The ones that I use most frequently are these, kind of mom and pop sort of organizations. And where they're, and generally these people have started these companies born out of personal experience. So unless they get absorbed into a larger conglomerate, or there's a company called Enjoy Life, which has been absorbed into Mondelez, and they're great, but they only make, cookies and things like that.
Right.
And there's so many more needs, for food. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an opportunity, but is it, are we, food allergy people, are we a significant enough part of the population to have that be worth their while financially right now? I don't know.
Well, I can definitely go online and tell you how many people on Facebook are involved.
Yeah.
When it comes to food allergies, I could give you an audience size in the U.S. alone, or anywhere in the world, really. Yeah.
I mean, it's a significant group. But food allergy food is expensive.
Yeah.
It's really expensive, and twice the cost of, a bag of Oreos versus an Enjoy Life cookie box. And it's about half the amount. And so, they're marketed to people who, just have more money. And a lot of people just kind of roll the dice when it comes to food allergies, because it's so significant. It's just so expensive. So I'm hopeful. I'm absolutely hopeful always. Yeah. I've been in the food allergy world for 20 years, and I've seen tremendous improvements in those 20 years. But there's still a long way to go.
Maybe you could advise on that one day. So
who knows? Maybe so. That'd be great.
Who knows? Yeah. Well, the entrepreneurial world has also become a completely different thing because of the online digital world that I live in every day. So you never know. We may be able to see something like that come to fruition sooner rather than later.
Good.
All right. Well, anything else that you want to add to the discussion before we go?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And that's all for today. And I look forward to hearing from you if any updates come about. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Sally. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. Subscribe to this podcast to hear all our episodes. Go to shoutyourcause.com to our podcast page for information on our guests and notes from this show.